Candace Owens is well known for making controversial claims. But what most don't know is that there is a history of harassment that includes threats of physical violence by Candace. These threats were sent over Facebook Messenger and led to her arrest. Today, we'll show you the proof. If someone was to do an internet search or look at her Wikipedia page to find out how Candace first started getting mentioned and noticed in the headlines, you'll discover that she is first mentioned in the news because she was a victim to a hate crime. These headlines state that back in 2007, when she was 17 years old and a senior at Stamford High School, she received racist death threats via voicemail. The news will state that these voice messages totaled 2 minutes and came from a group of white male classmates, which included the son of then mayor and future Democratic Governor Donnell Malloy. You may also see a lawsuit filed by her and her family in which the high school she attended at the time had to pay her $37,000 for failing to protect her. On the surface, it looks like she's an innocent victim whose only crime was being a person of color, and the school paying her out reiterates that image. Additionally, it also looks like the mayor's son was the primary perpetrator and the mayor tried to cover it up. This is not only just how the incident appears, it's how Candace Owens herself portrays the story in an essay she wrote featured and published by the Stamford Advocate. She says, and I quote, "Dear Connecticut, do you remember me? 9 years ago, I was a senior at Stamford High School, on the brink of a life-altering event. One night as I sat watching a movie, a group of anonymous boys called my cell phone and left me a series of voicemails. Their words, to this very day, represent the most horrific that I have ever heard uttered against another human being. If I was to stop the story here, it would sound like Candace Owens was minding her own business and randomly got accosted by people she didn't even know. Look, she even describes them as anonymous." She goes on to state that by some random stroke of misfortune, one of those involved was Governor Donnell Malloy's son, a boy I had never even laid eyes upon. What Candace is doing is projecting the idea that she was randomly accosted by people who had no motive to hurt her, and then uses what we call doublespeak for a technical loophole. She intentionally points out the fact that the mayor's son was involved and then goes on to say that she got all kinds of attention she didn't want. Now I'm going to read just one last part before we shatter this entire illusion. She goes on further to talk about the politician's son and states, "This connection meant that the arrest would not immediately be made. The local police told me they needed to treat the case with special diligence, and they called in the FBI to help determine whether the 4 boys, 3 of whom were perfect strangers to me, had committed a hate crime." And while she's calling those other 3 perfect strangers, she also describes all of them as anonymous and all of them as leaving her that voice message. And it can't be both. They were either all anonymous or they weren't. And this didn't sit right with me, so I decided to investigate further. I pulled up the news articles that were printed at that time and then later digitized. It turns out that Candace Owens wasn't a random target after all, and the truth is that Candace got into an argument with a fellow student by the name of Evan Kopeck just a few days prior to the incident. But there's a lot more. So, in short, we're going to summarize it like this. Candace gets into an argument with a fellow student, Evan Kopeck. A few days later, Evan is out with friends in which alcohol was purchased. A few of them get drunk, and then Evan's friend invites a third guy along. That third guy brings his friend along, who is Sam Malloy, the mayor's son. The plot twist here is that Sam, the mayor's son, is only 14 years old and is sitting in a car with much older teenagers he doesn't even know. So while this 14-year-old kid is sitting in this car with people he literally just met, Evan then calls Candace, who is also much older than the mayor's son. Candace was 17 and Sam, again, was only 14. He was just a 9th grader. After Evan, who is also much older than Sam, leaves his drunken rant tirade on Candace's voicemail, Candace Owens and her family get the NAACP involved. And when Candace finds out that this little boy was the mayor's son, she continues to viciously go after him. A year later, when Candace is 18, now an adult, a grown woman, she sues the school. And she sues for, and I quote, failing to act in part because one of the callers is the son of then Mayor Danelle Malloy. But the truth is, she acknowledged in the settlement that the school actually did no wrongdoing. And remember here where she said that because Sam was the mayor's son, connections meant that arrest would not immediately be made? Well, that's not true either. She also implies the FBI refused to investigate it, but here's the truth. It says the FBI has said it would not do an analysis because the recordings are poor and several voices yell over one another on the messages. But if her lying wasn't bad enough back then, it gets worse because she still portrays herself as a random victim to this day. Now, even though Candace was 18 and used a 14-year-old little boy to get money in a lawsuit because he was the mayor's son, some might be saying that it doesn't matter if she got into an argument with Evan. It doesn't give him the right to threaten Candace and use racial slurs. And while that's absolutely true, I want you to hold on tight to that energy. Hold on tight. Because after those voicemails were sent to Candace Owens, she was arrested with second-degree threatening and second-degree harassment after she sent messages to another person's Facebook account threatening physical harm. And this victim had nothing to do with the February incident with Evan at all. This means that Candace Owens is the common denominator in all of the chaos. But it doesn't stop there. In 2015, she becomes the CEO of a website called 180 Degrees, in which she pushes more violent rhetoric and also supports transgender ideology. Candace writes, and I quote, "Gender really is an idea the society made up." The other articles are not any better. She writes about why she hates women, another one titled "The Reason Stay-at-Home Wives Tend to Be Badass Crazy," and I think affairs are romantic. And then finally we see an article where she is unleashing her venom laced with curse words against the conservative Republican Party, in which that violent drama surfaces clearly as she states, and I quote, "The good news is they will eventually die off peacefully in their sleep, we hope, and then we can get right back on with the obvious social changes that needs to happen immediately." A year later, in 2016, she tries an initiative called Social Autopsy, in which people were solicited to take and share screenshots of other people, including minors, for perceived hate speech and upload those screenshots to what she calls the morgue.
Hey guys, it is Candace Owens, the founder of socialautopsy.com.
There are literally thousands of instances of hate speech being circulated online. The age of technology and social media has slowly disintegrated individual accountability, the consequences of which are devastating. Introducing Social Autopsy, the first ever search database that compiles and allows the public to easily access the digital footprint of individuals and companies. Our team has crawled through the public interfaces of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, creating real profiles for the individuals that lob hate speech over the web. These individuals are your teachers, doctors, neighbors, and business owners, and for the first time ever, you'll be given the chance to run a real background check on them to see what these people represent behind closed doors. Let me show you how it works. Plug in the name of any person, company, or organization. Our database will return any number of profile hits, which can then be narrowed down by city and state. When you've located a user, you will be brought to their autopsy report, which will consist of real screenshots of words that they have shared across social media platforms. Have someone that you'd like to add to our morgue? Submit them.
What about minors? We are seeing a lot of people that are showing concern for minors. We stand by the fact that we think the best time to be on our database is when you are a minor, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. We are trying to affect their, conscious when they're young.
The idea she would include minors shouldn't really surprise anyone, however. Don't forget the 14-year-old who didn't know who she was or the person she got into a fight with that we mentioned just a moment ago in the video. But in 2019, leading into 2025, things start to take a really dark turn. She goes on to be listed in 2 different mass shooters manifestos 6 years apart. The first incident took place in New Zealand in 2019, and the second one took place in America in 2025, just last year. Now, many apologists and perhaps folks trying to do damage control dismiss such occurrences as trolling, bots, or copycats. But none of those theories work, since who they hated were entirely different, and the person unalived themselves, making the writings having to have happened prior to the incident.
This was posted shortly before the shootings, along with several photos which match the crime scene photos that we have seen. What is in here is extremely disturbing and chilling. It's horrifying. Among the people who he says radicalized him, he cites Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes, a hard-right anti-Semitic pundit who you may remember he posts a flyer from the neo-Nazi hate group Goyim Defense League. That group, you may remember, was here in Nashville last summer holding demonstrations.
And as horrific as those incidences are, she's still using the word Goyim in order to incite rage, the very word that was on those flyers. But just as conflict and fighting seems to be what drives her, so too was it fighting and drama that actually caused her to become a Republican. In an article written by NBC, it quotes Candace and says, "I became a conservative overnight," Owens said in 2017 on an online talk show hosted by libertarian political personality Dave Rubin. "I realized that liberals were actually the racist. Liberals were actually the trolls." At the same time, she explained Trump's message of fake news began to resonate. I personally don't think she was ever sincere about becoming a Republican and simply inserted herself in order to destroy the whole movement and create division. But let's fast forward now to 2025. Candace targeting politicians may have begun with using a minor simply because he was the son of a mayor in the early 2000s. But this time she decides to go after the French president's wife by claiming she's a man. And to nobody's surprise, Candace is being sued by the French president. But this is the worst part. Candace's bullying and evil harassment of the French president's wife is so bad that the president's wife has been put into a position where she will provide photographic evidence to prove she's a woman. That is utterly demoralizing, and I guess she really meant it when she says she hates women. But the bottom line is, it's unthinkable. Nobody, absolutely nobody, should be put in that position. And in response to the French president's lawsuit, Candace has seemed to become completely unhinged and paranoid. On November 22nd, 2025, she tweeted that she had quote-unquote credible enough claims from a government official, and goes on further to say that Macron had ordered a group of people to assassinate her. The bottom line is, her origin story was born from hate and threats of physical violence that include threats so bad she was arrested for it. Her legacy is built on darkness, as her optimism comes from the idea people she disagrees with in her Mad Hatter article will perish into the grave, and laces her ideas, her work, with words like the morgue. Mass shooters mention her in their manifestos and screams with paranoid delusions of imagined assassination plots against her by the very people she is psychologically tortured. So it's no surprise that she's going after Erica Kirk. It's what she does. But the real question is, should someone like this still have a platform? Let me know what you think in the comments, and thanks for watching, guys.